Well, I think in many respects, it's about articulating the vision and then continue to emphasize that vision at every opportunity you can. And then to make sure that people understand the role that they can play in achieving that vision. Because people have to have a goal in order to work toward something of importance. And to understand that they can add value regardless of where they may be, what community or state that they may live in. But if there's a common vision that they have bought into, they fully understand, they understand the importance of the pursuit of that vision, then I think they are more apt to participate and to expend their energies in support of that vision.
Mark, what did you hear that sort of caught your excitement? What did you hear from Bob?
I heard a lot of good things, actually, and I want to say I'm really honored to be asked to come up here. And I took all sorts of notes, and now I'm going to try to articulate them. But I think I'll start with the quote that you gave about doing nothing in pursuit of the right goal is 1,000 times worse than making a mistake. And hopefully that'll cover me if I make any mistakes right now. It seems like we come to these conferences year after year, and I go to many conferences like this that talk about how different constituent groups can help support public lands. And I come from the private sector, and our goal is very much similar to the goal of a lot of our federal and state, what I'll call partners, collaborators. But we have a much different way of going about it, and sometimes people in the private sector have a much different bottom line. Our bottom line is about keeping in business, but also doing good in business, doing the right things. And so I guess I have maybe a couple of questions, so I'll intersperse them with some comments. So I guess the first one would be, I think it speaks to all the things we've discussed. How does the private sector work with the federal agencies, knowing and the state agencies, knowing that mistakes are okay, when most companies' goals are going to be to make money, and the government doesn't really focus on that bottom line, making money. How do you bridge that gap, and what's the appropriate venue to direct those kind of interests towards the government to say, hey, we want to support the outdoors, and it's good for our business too. How can we do that in a way that's mutually beneficial?
I hope all of you heard the question. The private sector does play an important role, and can continue to play even a more important role, even with the bottom line being making money. I think sometimes those of us who work in government, sometimes you look at any endeavor where people make a profit with some suspicion. We have to get beyond that. Our jobs and our tasks and our responsibilities is to make sure that the public gets a fair return for the use of public assets. That's where our focus and attention needs to be as we negotiate leases or partnership agreements with those in the private sector who do and will make some sort of monetary return on their investments. For government management, one of the benefits of managing public lands for multiple uses is that for every dollar invested by the United States taxpayer, we return $4. There's not many agencies that can say that. I'm going to be saying that a lot in front of the appropriations committee. But I do think that we have to look at it. We're no longer, none of us are in a position of being all things to all people. We should have never been in that business in the first place. That should have never been our goal. We are not in competition with one another. We're in partnership to serve our constituents. So as we look to the future, as we look from our past and gain experience in the past, but as we formulate plans for the future, we really do need to take to heart what the private sector can bring to the equation, what they can bring to the partnership. And it's about enhancing the quality of experience on the public lands as it relates to government management. We ought to welcome that. We ought to be receptive. And we ought to be encouraging. As long as we look and make sure that the public that we serve receives a fair return for these public assets, again, then we serve our purpose.
And I think it's important to for the private sector to understand the sensitivities that public lands can't just be overly commercialized, that there has to be a win-win. And I know that part of the role that we try to play with the advertising, that's a bad word, sponsor community, is to be an interpreter. I often get in the middle of the guys who have the ad budgets and the nonprofit partners and the federal partners that we have and say, I'm not going to let you talk to each other first. Because instantly the guys in the private sector say, well, we want to put our logo on, the Washington Monument and, scatter it across the Mount Rushmore and do all sorts of things that maybe in their normal world of NASCAR sponsorships is totally acceptable. And as soon as that is uttered in a meeting with a nonprofit government partner, the conversation ends. So I think it's really important to maintain that sensibility. And I think that sensitivity is probably most acute in things that relate to health. And we've, to segue to another point and topic that we've been discussing, how to make the connection between health and public lands, and how do we get, not so much that anyone has to be told it's good for you to go outside and run around and do recreation, but how do we get the medical community to embrace that and the pharmaceutical community in a way, again, that private partners can reach en masse people and reinforce that message. Dr. Michael Suk had come already many years ago when he was a White House fellow, and we talked about the same kind of issues that we're talking about today. From my personal perspective, the key is finding a way to take action and to the point I made initially, that it's okay to make mistakes while you're taking that action. Any suggestions on what a good next step would be to start engaging private partners in that realm?
Well, I think, corporate America could play a very important role in getting the messaging out to the families. I'm not sure that the government is the right entity to continue to be telling Americans what they ought to be doing. I think we need to, again, focus on the opportunities we have to provide the resources as appropriate to the various uses that people would like to pursue. But I do see that the messaging could come and should come from others. We can reinforce that message during talks and our interactions with the public and in various forums that we participate in. But I think it would go a long way if corporate America incorporated such a message as part of their campaigns and marketing whatever product that they're selling at the time. But to also include part of that messaging as stewardship responsibility. Because as we look to the future, and Derek, you mentioned about one employee for every 25,000 acres, we have one law enforcement employee, one law enforcement ranger for every 1,000,000 acres. And so there's no way that we will ever be in a position of being able to provide the oversight, protection that many of these very, very sensitive resources deserve. So we're very reliant upon people behaving, acting responsibly. And that's where corporate America can also serve us well in making sure that that stewardship message, maybe it's time for me to leave, maybe that stewardship message is incorporated as part of our marketing campaign.
We're going to continue. Well, let me ask you a question. Okay. One of the words that you used, I think, was so important. It was about empowerment. And we were talking before this session just how important it is for you to signal to the people, those 10,000 employees within your agency, that they're empowered to take action, to look. Now, the other thing we need, in addition to empowerment, is time. And that's really tough right now. You were talking about you landed at DFW, you turned on your BlackBerry, and up came these emails after emails after emails. We're all facing that. It doesn't matter whether it's you, Bob Abbey, the director of the Bureau of Land Management, or whether it's one of your people out there in the field in Arizona getting emails from all kinds of people. The question I guess I have is, how do we find that special, thoughtful place that Pooh Bear had? How do we find that place and that time to think about the big issues, to really think about how we can get off the treadmill that we're on so often and really apply the best part of our brains to thinking about how we can find a better solution to the problems. How do we both empower and give that gift of perspective?
Well, the first thing that guides our actions is compliance with the law. That's the one solid foundation that every action that we take has to take into account. You know, I got in trouble at a national conference one time saying that I never read a BLM regulation until I left BLM. And I was told by some members of the audience that maybe I should never have admitted that. But that's the truth. Now, I'm not saying for those BLM employees that are here today not to follow my lead, but we have to adhere to the law. We have to know what the policies require. We have to know, to some degree, the guidance that are derived from the regulations. But at the same time, it's about using common sense here. And I think so often we have lost sight of common sense, of being able, when someone calls and they ask a question, of being able to respond to that question. Someone walks into an office with a proposal, of being able to provide an immediate response to that proposal, or at least taking it under advisement and then in a timely or in a fairly quick turnaround or timeline, get back to that proposal. Instead of just leaving someone hanging for months at a time without any answer and saying, well, you know, it's up at the solicitor's office or the lawyer's reviewing it, or, you know, we had to send it to Washington, D.C. You know, one of the best advice I got as I was working with the Bureau of Land Management in Colorado as the acting state director there several years back. Never look east for direction. Use your gut instinct. Let that guide your action, but always be cognizant to never break the law, because that's where you're going to be most vulnerable. You know, again, it's about common sense, about knowing what is the right thing to do, and then moving forward and taking that action for all the right reasons. If we make a mistake, we'll find out, and we can deal with it. You know, as long as someone doesn't lose their life, we can deal with it. And I think, you know, it's about empowerment. It's about people making sure that you hire the right people for the right job. You give them the tools in order to be successful. And then you have the confidence and trust in them to go out and do the right thing right the first time.
I do have one follow-up to that same thought. You mentioned the notion of evolving with the public need and meeting the new trends in recreation, and I've asked about the new trends in how to disseminate information. And I think with that comes a significant risk. So it's really refreshing to hear the attitude of I'm going to empower my people to do the right thing that they think is the right thing, and have that bottom-up decision-making. It's not the case in every branch of the government or in every business, but I find that the only way that people learn to succeed and do better is by taking those risks and making those mistakes. I wonder, I mean, this is more, I'm not sure, a comment or a question, how do you overcome some of the fear that making a decision that's a bad decision could set a precedent? I was in a meeting once where I heard that people in the field were not really in a position to be held accountable because there was no real negative outcome. In the private sector, if you do a good job,